that I approach a question like, is God real? Is the same way that I would approach a question like, Genesis and I are friends. Let's say we're sisters. I love Genesis and Genesis loves me. If somebody asked me to prove whether she loves me, I would be like, well, I have no idea. Especially if she goes back in the room with a view and shuts the door, and I stay up here and I never go anywhere near her. If somebody says, prove to me that Genesis loves you and that you love her, I'd be like, well, I've got this letter that she wrote where she, I was at camp and she said that she missed me and that she cared about me, but maybe she just made that up. And I've got this gift she gave me, well, I don't know, maybe she didn't actually give that to me, maybe somebody else did. The truth is that I have no way to prove that I care about her, that she cares about me, until I am in relationship with her, and then I can personally know whether or not she cares about me. All of us know people that love us, or know people that we love. So in that relationship, the way that we know the love is real is through the experience of that love. It's very difficult to prove that God, actually, it's impossible to prove that God exists, prove that God exists, unless you are in relationship with Him. And then I can say without a doubt, I know God exists. But it's not through facts, it's through my relationship with God.
Along that same line, about believing if God exists or not, is are heaven and hell real? Is that something that...
We're going to like the deepest questions.
They don't seem as deep to me.
Well, some of those questions on there are kind of funny.
Okay.
I'm saying serious questions rather than funny.
All right.
Here we go. Are heaven and hell real? Yes. Next question. Hey, that's a yes or no question.
Okay, we'll try to find it out.
Here's my thought on if you're asking that question. When we think of heaven and hell, let's say I gave this answer about heaven is where you float on clouds and forever you sing the most annoying worship song that's stuck in your head for all eternity, and hell is where you're sitting there and there's some flame and the people that you can't stand are all around bothering you and you live like that forever. That exists. I would hope that most of you would be like, that's ridiculous. We, first of all, in our minds, have this idea that heaven and hell are this caricature, mostly of things that we've made up. What we can know from Scripture is that God said He made people. Then He made a way for people to live. People have turned away from God. And we've basically, in a lot of ways, said, God, you don't exist. You want to know us, but we don't really care about you and we don't want to know you. God does not say, but I made you, you have to stay in relationship with me. He says, okay. So then we're stuck in this spot where I've turned away from God and He's allowed me. Separation from God is the definition of hell. Here on earth, our separation from God, if I don't believe in Jesus and I'm not close to God, my separation from God is a certain distance. But there's a way that God is still trying to pursue and win back people who have turned away from Him. Separation after death is complete, full separation from God. Unity with God is when I'm close to God again, and I know Him, and I'm able to know Him because I've been forgiven for rebelling against Him. Unity with God here is like looking in a kind of bumpy mirror, or trying to look through a glass that's not quite clear. I can see what it's like to be in relationship with God, but it's not quite as good in any way as it will be after I die. So after death, I'm either with God forever, that's heaven, or separated from God forever, that's hell. And yes, that is real and it does exist. If God exists, heaven and hell must exist.
That was pretty deep. Okay. I have another one that's not quite as deep and maybe a little funnier. It is, are that's what she said jokes a sin? As in, like, on The Office, how he's always saying, that's what she said. Would that be considered a sin?
Do people know what that's what she said jokes are? Who does not know what a that's what she said joke is? I'm gonna need an example.
I think David is raising his hand.
You know, liar.
I could do this all night.
This is there's
Okay,
no
good.
judgment
That's
or
a simple
persecution
one.
here if you know how to explain it.
I'm gonna explain a that's what she said joke. So then I may or may not be sinning right now, which is what we'll answer.
Man, I could do this all night long.
That's what she said. Do you get the idea? Anything that somebody says that is not sexual at all, but then someone says that's what she said, suddenly becomes a joke that's about sex. Yeah. I'll take one more minute for everyone else to get it.
This might take a while.
Just saying the words, that's what she said, is not a sin.
Using it as a sexual reference.
Making a joke about sex is not automatically a sin. If I'm married and my husband and I are joking about sex, that's okay. If I say something that causes people to think about something that they shouldn't be thinking about, that's a sin. If I'm causing other people, when somebody cracks a "that's what she said" joke, I laugh and then I think about sex for a few minutes. And then I'm like, whoop! And I'm not married. So what happens in my mind is under what God would say, I shouldn't be thinking about sex because I'm not married. So that's what she said jokes cause people to think about sex. So usually there's sin. Now let me add a little bit to that. God is hilarious. He loves humor. And so just because something's funny does not mean that it's sin. That's what she said jokes are hilarious. They are sometimes funny because there's a little bit of rebellion in them, and it's saying like, God, we own sex and you can just step away and let us do with it what we want. So that being said, there are things that God thinks is funny that we probably would be shocked. There are also things that we think are funny that God is appalled. I'll just end with that. I think you get what I'm saying.
That was a really good definition. Next person who's going to come up and talk. Thanks, Christy. Eric, he's also one of our discussion group leaders. He's going to answer some questions next. Everyone give Eric a hand.